Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the HR and Payroll 2.0 podcast. I'm Pete Tiliakis, and as always, I'm joined by the legendary Julie Fernandez. Welcome, Julie.
Thanks, Pete. I'm excited to catch up here. It's midsummer. We're kind of in this interesting period where things are slowing down a little bit and people are taking some summer time off, right?
Yeah, I love it. I can actually do some work. No traveling, not much traveling anyway. I was in New York filming some things over the holiday weekend, but otherwise, no events. So I've been able to take it easy. And it's a good time to just sort of catch your breath. And we were just saying, right, it's been a little bit of a quiet summer, honestly, for updates and acquisitions. I think we're getting rared up for a really hot fall in that way. So yeah,
I'm sure you're right. But just proportionately to not have a lot of news about mergers or acquisitions or other things, this feels like a good breather.
Yeah. I also think a lot of folks are maybe putting a little bit of money on the bench and kind of waiting to see, right? I think there's a lot of that, buyers, vendors, whatnot. But I expect we're gonna see a lot of product though come fall. I'm excited. We're gonna be at HR Tech. We're gonna be at Workday Rising. We're gonna be at a bunch of other events around the circuit. So we'll be seeing what all the HCMs are doing. I'll be going to Dayforce, UKG, some others. I know you've got some things planned. So I'm excited.
Absolutely.
I'm excited. AI, right? Everybody's got to fill in the blanks on AI.
Same here. Table stakes, AI, and yet we're still very, very early in the cycle of talking about AI and what it really will do. I know I had a conversation with someone who's like, "Okay, well, what are your highlights for coming into this year?" And I said, "Well, AI. Well, we talked about that last year. So what's after that?" And I'm like, no, this is going to be around for a while.
It's not going away. It's not going away.
It's not like a year blurb and then it goes away and everybody's got it,
Yeah. Well, I don't know about you, Julie, but I'll tell you this. I've really challenged myself. I mean, I'm always like this, I feel like anyway. But lately I've been doing some things. I've sort of started to, I would say, not go deeper into AI. It's almost like organizing my AI. In other words, I'm starting to challenge myself to use some tools on the regular as an interface to what I do. So I don't want to name the tools. I'll just keep that to myself right now. That'll be a long podcast if I start getting into all that. But there are a lot of tools that you can get to become sort of your UI to your laptop, right? To your Mac, whatever. For me, it's a Mac, and help me be a jumping off point to being more proficient. So that's been big for me. But the other thing that I'm starting to do, and I've been sloppy about this, is I'm starting to build myself a prompt library. Because there's things that I'm doing, right? Like summarizing the podcast transcripts and pulling up news, finding out what news is out there so I don't have to do that manually anymore. Just little things that I do as an analyst that I'm starting to build. And I'm starting to make a library so I can start to sharpen those prompts. So just little things I'm doing to try to skill up, I guess you could say. Hopefully everybody's doing that. But I think there's a good...
I would say I'm doing the same. And one of the things that I've started with my team here at Herron Palmer is part of our routine practice meetings are sharing a little bit of what have you tried and what are you trying or what have you found? And we all have different ways that we approach even our exploration, and the silliest things, like start it from here and, start it from Teams and not from MS Office or, little tips and tricks. And one guy is, more of an IT based guy. And so he's interested in, trying to build some agents, right? Which is beyond what I think many of us would do. And so we're spending almost half of our practice update time really talking about, how we're touching and trying and exploring a little bit with AI and sharing with each other, because I feel like that's something that everybody wants to see and do, right? Yeah,
knowledge sharing too. I mean, I think we're all curious. We're all trying things, so why not come together and compare notes? I think it's a good idea. So yeah. So look, I've got that same ambition, right? I know right now today we're going to be unveiling the Payroll Profession Confidence Index.
We are.
That is the next phase for the PPCI. I very much want to work with my web developer and my own skills and see if we can maybe bring a GPT or some sort of a AI into that to say, hey, when you come and take the PPCI in the future, maybe there's going to be enough data that you can then benchmark, get some sort of, checkpoint, if you will, pulse check on your own sort of where you sit as an operation, and maybe give a little bit more value than just asking people to put their voice in. So maybe year 4 or 5, I don't know how much data we're going to need for this, but at a minimum, we can start benchmarking against what we have, and we're peeling back the onion year after year. So lots to talk about there. So I'll just shelve that because that's a sneak peek. We're gonna be running through it right now. But Julie, I thought we could talk about the podcast for just a second. Tell everybody how things are going.
Yep.
So yeah, look, I mean, look, we're doing very well. I mean, and thank you so much to everybody who participates in this show, who reaches out to us, who has listened from day one, who's just started listening. Thank you to everyone. We really really appreciate you. And look, we're staying absolutely starkly committed to this model of authentic, sales free, ad free education. We very much want you to feel like you can come in and learn with us. We're really just wanting you to be a fly on the wall, access the brilliant leaders and people that we come across, and be a part of these very organic conversations. And so I think it's I'm very proud. I think, Julie, we're at about 8 to 9,000 downloads so far here in July. That's
Mm-hmm.
amazing, right? We're well over 1,000. We've got very consistent listeners coming every week. We've got new listeners coming all the time. I think we've hit 76 countries with at least
Countries,
one
yeah.
download this year
Yeah.
since Jan 1. I'm so proud of that. That's amazing.
I know. You cannot say that we are
Yeah.
a domestic only
No.
podcast by a long shot. Yeah.
No, there's a good 60% of our listeners are coming to us from US, but after that it begins to become like Netherlands, Spain, India, on and on and on. And so yeah, and we've got some listeners in some countries I have never heard of. A few in Africa that were not not on my bingo card, but welcome. Thank you. We hope we're meeting your expectations, and we appreciate you staying. But Julie, what I want everyone to know is 2026 is going to be another level of throttling up. We are really working on some very exciting things here at the show. Nothing's going to change about the way we do business, if you will, in terms of how we engage the content we bring you. If anything, we're going to bring you even bigger guests from even further locations. And we absolutely have plans to just keep doubling down on what we've built so far. So what I guess we're asking is stick and stay with us, right? Just be patient. I think we are very much, hitting a stride now where we're ready to level up, right? And we're ready to go to the next level. And we really appreciate everybody doing that. The best way you could support us, and I don't know that we've ever really asked this much, but
I don't
is
think we have.
subscribe. Please subscribe to us. If you could subscribe to the podcast on any platform that you prefer, or all the platforms that you prefer. I personally like to do a little bit of, for my podcasting, a little YouTube, a little bit of Apple, a little bit of Spotify. Depends on what the situation is. Sometimes I can do videos. Sometimes I can just hit the audio. Whatever that is, subscribe to us. It'll push to you. It'll help us out. And look, if subscribing's not right at this moment, no worries, no commitment. Give us a like, give us a share. Hey, and if you feel compelled, open up the stars, throw us a few stars, hopefully more than few, and let us know what you think of us with a rating. All of those things would be very, very simple, free ways for you to return value back to us and let us continue to do what we're doing. And we thank you so much for doing that. And so, yeah, if you could like, subscribe, share, all that.
By the way, just for people that don't do this often,
yes,
more stars is better.
Yes.
It's not like 1 star means we're number one, right? So,
no.
Just general guidelines. If you're doing some stars, more stars means more likey. So think about it.
We had a 1-star rating once, and we don't know if that meant they thought we were number one or if they just don't like us. And we're apologize if we let them down in some way. But look, get whatever you can do. We would love the engagement. It would be it'd be a vote of confidence for us, and it absolutely helps us out with what we're doing. And yes, listen, just stick around. Stick around.
Another thing that I want to really encourage, because we do have folks when we push out information about a new episode who will comment on the LinkedIn post. That might be the easiest way to engage. Yeah. And hopefully you'll see responses every time you do, whether they're personal or public. And so that is appreciated as well. It lets us know what you're thinking. It lets us know what you like or don't like. And that is just as helpful. So engage somehow. Let us know you're there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And look, I don't know if people know this or not, but we do not take, we get bombarded with folks that want to come on the show. And we really appreciate it. Thank you. But we don't take guests that way. We typically must have a relationship. These are real conversations. We're not faking this in any way. I don't know if people understand that about a lot of the shows out there. A lot of shows out there are very much just, hey, I got a book to sell. I've got a thing to sell. I've got something I want to talk to people about. Can you put me on your show? Can I pay you to be on your show? Can I do this? Can I do that? That's not how we curate our content or our engagement with our audience. We want to bring you real conversations that we have either already had in some private way and want to expand on that, or in some cases, it's a walk down the hallway at an event, Julie, and we had some conversation. It was like, we've got to have you come on and
Yeah.
talk about this in longer form. And that's really where all this comes from. So I would argue to say that every single one of our guests, we had at least some material relationship, some deeper than others. And we have fundamentally curated a conversation that is, and it's not scripted. It's fundamentally just themes, and where it goes, it goes. And that's the realness here. And so we hope you appreciate that authenticity, and we want to double down on that. So if we don't respond and don't offer you to come on because you've got a book on, healthcare real estate, I'm sorry. It's just, I literally had someone come, some expert of healthcare real estate. They wanted to come on the show. And I was like, I didn't even know what to respond. I don't know what we would talk about, first of all. But second of all, it's just not what we do. So, just know that
Flattering, but not
yeah,
what we do.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we protect you, I guess, from kind of this nonsense. And we will never bring someone on just to talk to them because, they've got a book. It's just not what we do. So stick and stay with us. Give us a like, give us a share, give us a rating. We'll take all of it, and we appreciate you.
All right. That's
Julie,
it.
without further ado, are you ready
without
for the
further ado.
2025
I
Payroll
wish we
Profession
had that.
Confidence
We got to
Index?
work on our little sounds, because if I could make a drum roll, I would, but I'm not going to embarrass myself and
Yes.
try. So
Yes. Look, so just real quick, if anyone doesn't know what the Payroll Profession Confidence Index is, it is a research report that I came up with more than a few years ago, but just launched last year. This is the second iteration. And the PPCI is fundamentally, in my opinion, it's not an opinion. I think it's a fact. I don't know that you can point to anything like this in the market. I'm not saying that because I came up with it. I'm saying that because it's reality. Much of the research in the marketplace, and I'm guilty of leading some of it, has been lead gen oriented.
Yeah.
What do you have? What can we sell you? How much tech do you need? Where do you need it? That sort of thing. Or very operationally focused. How many people do you have? How much does it cost? What, benchmarks. And all of those things are very beneficial in their own way too.
Yeah, there's a reason for that. That's because there is a demand for that, and it's valuable information, but it's not at all where your heart went, right? When you were thinking about information to bring.
No. I wanted payroll research for payroll. I wanted payroll research by payroll. People talking on behalf of themselves, right? Not a vendor, not a talking head like me talking, someone doing something about it. And so I said, well, how do we make a research report that is oriented in sentiment, in the health of the industry, not just from a staffing perspective, but also just a support? What are their relationships like? Who's winning in this strategic? What is strategic, right? We whip HR and payroll all the time and always have. Be more strategic, be more strategic. No one ever has put anything in front of them and said, this is the definition of what that looks like. And so that's what this report was really set out to do, was let's let payroll talk to the C-suite, but let me be the platform for that, right? I have the connectivity and the platform to reach people. Let me take your voice and go and echo it upward to the C-suites, and let me echo it over to the vendors, and let's make sure that we're building and preparing and protecting, nurturing, right?
And
the industry.
I think a natural outcome of this, Pete, has been a number of folks that are really active in the market today as buyers, as payroll practitioners, experts, leaders, providers have recognized an advocacy that goes on for payroll through your work in the PPCI, for sure, and also through the conversations that we've been having to talk to people like Anne Marie V and others that we've had on about elevating payroll, about payroll talent, and about the complexities and the strategy around payroll. And so these things have all kind of come together and created a little bit of a movement, I think, to recognize payroll as something other than next gen bookkeeping.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. And I appreciate everyone who's leaned in and helped us with this PPCI. I think it's also important for people to understand that this research is entirely free of any monetization. I do not allow anyone to sponsor this, have access. No vendors get access to this. It is entirely anonymous. You don't have to tell us who you are to take it. We do ask some basic indicative things about the size of organization and complexity. We don't triangulate any information. We don't even ask you to provide us any personal information to download it. In fact, anything at payrollinfluences.com is free of a gatekeeping. It's free. You take it, you do what you want with it. And this is all about just helping. So this is by payroll, for payroll, anonymous, sponsor free, unlike anything out there. So I'm very proud of it. I really, really appreciate everyone that got involved. If you haven't got involved or you haven't heard of it, watch out for next year. We're going to go higher. We're going to go bigger. And I hope that you'll be able to share and be a part of that. I think, Julie, we're gonna get it away. I've been kind of running it right at the end of mid to end Feb. I think a lot of folks are still got their eye on the ball that year end.
That's right. With
I'm gonna
year
try to,
end.
yeah, I'm
Yep.
gonna try to pull it a little. I thought, well, it'd be kind of the end, but I know, I remember, I know how it is. It's sometimes April before you can really breathe. And so what I'm really going to try to do is pull that more into March, more spring. And that way payroll's got a little bit more time on their hands, run the cycle a little longer, and hopefully eventually turn it into a lead gen tool of my own that is a lead gen promotion for the research itself, meaning giving people the ability to have, I call it a lead gen. I'm not taking any lead information. I'm just going to give you back a report that allows you to benchmark yourself, to incentivize people to want to come and take more people to take it. So we want to try and use the data to turn around and benefit the people engaging it. So,
Yeah.
okay.
And super translation
Yeah,
for that is this is an ongoing thing, right? We've said that
it is.
from year one of
Yep.
the results that you launched last year, which is your plan is to keep this going because there's value in the insights and the
Yeah.
changes in data from year to year. And I would tell you that is the thing I'm most excited about.
Yes.
And today is a
Yes.
reveal of the second annual
Yes.
PPCI survey results. So,
Yeah. Not a
yeah,
huge swing and change from year. Sorry, my hair's getting in my face here.
I know.
Not a huge
I got a
change
little one
in.
back there too.
I know, right? I just got a haircut recently, so I should be good. All right, let's pop this baby up and let's get through this because I think everyone's probably anticipating. This is our table of contents, and I'm going to jump around. Okay, I'm going to jump out of the exec summary, which is right up front, so you can fundamentally read this in probably about 4 slides by way of the executive summary. And again, this was written to the C-suites. Ideally, we really want to talk upward and say, hey, this is what you need to understand about what's going on in payroll, and here's what comes out of it when you lean in. And so you're going to see once again a sentiment section, an operations health section, an impact and value section, and then of course the appendix where we'll provide some of that comparisons between multi-country and single country companies and those above and below 1,000 employees. So all right, let me jump you forward. Let's get right into where I'm going to jump down into the sentiment space, right? We'll come back to the exec summary in a little while
This is my favorite part because, well,
with that.
they're all my favorite parts, but I have to tell you, like, nobody is measuring sentiment, right?
I know.
This
I
is
don't think
something
so.
that has not been measured
Yeah.
elsewhere, I don't believe at all. And so
Yeah.
this is strikingly
Well,
unique.
let me explain. I mean, and I hate to be Debbie Downer, but none of those other surveys actually care anything about your sentiment. They care about what they can sell your leaders, right? So the problem there is that that's the point. That's the gap in this research. We're not asking payroll how they're doing. We're asking them what can we sell you, and that's a totally different conversation. So, yeah, no, I appreciate that. I appreciate you pointing that out. Sorry, my hair's on my face here. Okay, so look, not a lot of movement here. I tried to show the year over year. Now, what I'll tell you, Julie, is last year was a baseline. And
Yeah.
we understood there was a lot we wanted. I was chomping at the bit to go deeper and deeper, but I was like, look, we gotta lay the groundwork here somewhere. I don't love surveys that are very long. So we tried to create a give and take with trying to keep this around 20 or so questions at the core. I mean, and there's certain variations within that probably have more than 20 clicks. But the point is, I'm trying to save people time, trying to be succinct, and trying not to ask any overlapping things. So there were some things and there's also things we learned and made modifications to. We peeled back the onion on a few things, but we also tightened up some things. So there might be some differences this year, but we're going to try to stabilize that in year 3 and forward. So we shouldn't be moving it too much. Anyway, overall, you can see not a lot of movement here. It's a pretty static, sort of sentiment, right? Payroll's, I think, very much cautiously optimistic, right? They're feeling empowered by technology. There's a lot of excitement for what technology can do, but there's also still a lot of, well, I'm still not respected in my organization. I'm still not getting the investment. I still don't have that technology. Or even situations where it's like, we have some of those things, but we're still not necessarily getting the respect and the engagement that we really need to be successful. So I think there's just a little bit of a cautious optimism still going on right now. Oh, let me back up. And I didn't mention this in the beginning. This year we hit about 640 or so respondents. It's about a 100-person drop. We didn't go as far as we wanted. We did go further into more countries, 31 countries versus 28 from last year. But we do need, that's what I was saying about that help, about getting everyone to share it. We really need to get more folks leaned in. We had some folks step up. We had some folks kind of do some things that were a little different than last year. And I think that changed maybe the impact a little. So I'll show you that in the demographics later where we saw the drop off. But, this is what worries me a little bit, Julie, here is that I think there's just a low level of respect and engagement still happening, right? We've got, I thought this was a great quote here at the top, right? We're rock stars of our own concert, but we're not recognized outside the concert hall. there's a lot of heartbreaking qualitative details when you ask the why behind some of these things. And we did ask many of the, I probably should have gone over the methodology. I apologize. The way we did this was we looked at this one of two ways. We did an NPS score of a 1 through 5, 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest. What we tried to do is say, like, look, the 2 and 1s are detractors. The 4s and 5s are your promoters, right? 5s being folks that have achieved the highest level. 4 means they're on their way to that path, and 3 means they're pretty much a neutral, right? So from an NPS standpoint, what we then try to do is carve off what is, if we looked at all the 4s and 5s, what is the percentage of those folks performing at a high level versus those that are not, and vice versa. In some cases, we represented things as the opposite. So I have that explained up front in the methodology, but I should point that out. So in many cases, you're seeing that sort of high end or low end spectrum to give you kind of emphasis for where the actual maturity is in the market. So anyway, outside of that 1 through 5 rating sort of scale across the research, we also ask these qualitative inputs. And again, I think there's a lot of payroll being left out, payroll being undervalued, not understood about what they're doing and what they impact, and really just sort of being led, right? Being dragged along. Hey, we made a decision. Go do this. Not being part of the decision. There's just a lot of that in here. It's very, very upsetting. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think the other thing that is a challenge that you have to acknowledge, I know you're the audience, right? The ultimate audience is up to the C-suite,
Yeah.
but we're not in a situation with payroll where there is one single best model and where payroll fits and who owns this and
Yeah.
who takes responsibility for moving the football down the field, right? And so you can't look across even a handful of your closest peers and say, well, if I just did what XYZ did, I would move my football 30 yards or whatever it is. And so
Yeah.
even the C-suite and the executive leadership and those of you that are the leaders of your payroll organization, you all are trying to move the football in your own way based on the play that's handed to you and the players that are there. And that makes it a slower roll, right? To
Yeah.
replicate and get that momentum. And it's hard to appreciate that until you're really working over and over again in different organizations yourself as a leader or with different organizations and seeing like, oh, the playbook for this one is just totally different than the playbook for another. And that makes it more difficult than just rinse and repeat. Let me follow a template and get where I need to go.
Right. Yeah. And I think payroll is going to have to do some of that work of selling all that, right? I mean, and positioning themselves, repositioning themselves. There's a lot that has to happen there. So yeah, we'll get to that here in a little bit more. But let's then get into this concept of the invested leader versus a leader that is investing. Still very kind of balanced there. Good that we're equal. I think we want to see those equal, right? But I think that we are also needing to see more of that, and I think that's a gap here, right? We don't have leaders that are fundamentally leaning into payroll, and we're going to show you some of that impact and outcome when they do. But I think we've got some work to do here, right? We've only got about 45 or so, 42% of the professionals operating with a high level of confidence that their leaders are fully leaned into them. Very important ingredient. Very, very important ingredient. Okay, let's jump in here to the operational maturity. And this year is where we made some changes, Julie. So this is where I got away from kind of having this maturity scale because I think that's sort of, you could argue that it's somewhat subjective, right? So I said, okay, let's just component this, right? Let's break this down into the components of maturity and let's look at it in that regard. So, and then I kind of look at it overall. And then I also look at a 5 pillars outcome as well to see how they're doing with the 5 pillars of modern payroll. So as you can see, right, we're doing okay, right? And I think what we're finding is that payroll is doing really well at keeping the lights on, right? They're doing pretty well at the blocking and tackling, but it's not the trend. It's the transformative stuff that they're not really ready for, and they're not doing that well with. And a lot of that is rooted in still in technology and integrations, but it's also again lacking. It's also starting off with the lack of vision and strategy. One of the things you can see there at the left we asked this year that we didn't ask last year was around vision, strategy, and roadmap. Only about half have this, which it makes sense when you look over and see only about half are actually finding themselves viable for the future for their company's strategic direction. So that I think we've got to get people to realize is like, okay, great, you're doing the table stakes, but now you got to start doing those extra credit things, right? You got to start thinking longer term. You got to start thinking bigger picture. And tech is going to be a big part of that, but it's also about having a vision for what payroll ought to be. And I think we're seeing more leaders do that in my conversations, at least at PayCon this year. There were a few that had, when we were talking about transformation, they were talking about what their vision was. And I thought that was very refreshing and a great mature step. So
Yeah,
Good to see.
I love that
Yeah.
ad. I think what will be interesting year to year then
Yep.
is to see, it's one thing to say you have a vision, strategy, and roadmap. It's another
Yeah.
thing to follow it, to progress it,
Funded.
and
Yep.
and quite honestly, those change. I mean,
Yeah.
as your organization changes, it's a living document, and it's something that you have to constantly shift and change and react to. It has to be
Yeah.
agile. So,
Yeah.
I'll be excited to see how that evolves over the next several years as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of transformation needed. I just don't know if a lot of firms have come around to that to that realization and making that investment yet. So hopefully we'll get it there. So, all right, yeah, go ahead.
I
Go.
had one more thought. If you flip
Yeah,
back for just a
yeah, yeah,
second,
yeah.
Pete,
No
I
worries.
think I feel like the purple right hand side
Yep.
might be something that becomes frustrating to some payroll leaders who feel like they have invested in technology. And
Yeah,
yet, there's still progress to be made in integrations tech and automation, right?
yeah,
And I would just say, like, take heart. Don't lose courage, or don't be discouraged by that, because there is so much new going on in those spaces. And yes, you may have made an investment and gotten yourself to a newer platform or a newer place, and that's really important, and it moves the needle for you. But at the same time, the industry is still moving the needle
yeah,
further, and so
yeah,
I feel like it's natural for that to look like that. But I could see it maybe being discouraging if you're someone who has been actively moving that needle or
yeah.
aggressively moving that needle.
Agreed, agreed. And look, I think that screams that all solutions aren't equally created, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of unified in the market. There's a lot of other buzzwords that are out there that doesn't necessarily kick the tires, right? Make sure
Right.
you know what you're getting. Make sure you understand how that's going to operate under the hood because it's very, very, very critical to the experience.
Yeah.
So yeah. All right. So just kind of looking at those with the strong vision and strategy, how different do they look, right? And when they do have that, they end up having a higher level of confidence and maturity just overall, right? They've got better platforms and technology and integrations. They've got more standard processes, more centralization, and just fundamentally are in a better position. So, just another call to action to think about starting with the end in mind, right? Bringing that strategy forward first, knowing where you're going to go, what you want to be when you grow up, as I like to say. We've only got about 17% of the operations out there operating at a high level of maturity right now. So we still have, I think we're at 12 last year, something like that. Now, again, we calculated this a little differently. So I didn't necessarily do the year over year. But if you were to take, like for like, it would be about 12%, I think is what it was. You got about only half, maybe 45% of ops that are functioning at a very high level of tech and automation maturity. And only half of them, or slightly more than half, are ready to support their strategic direction of their business. So get that vision, hopefully tie that with those invested in and engaged leaders and start to make progress, I think is what this is telling you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I wonder if on the
yeah,
bottom end of that scale too, there's folks who really don't know because they're still not what that strategic direction of the business is might
yeah.
not be clear to them.
Or if
And
yeah,
so,
right.
yeah,
Payroll's not even
right.
finding out. Yeah,
So how could you possibly feel prepared for it if you're not a part of the conversation, or you don't, or you're not
yeah,
hearing where that's happening? So it'd be interesting to see
yeah.
as we do some overall work in this space, what happens as payroll does become more informed.
Yeah,
And
that should be concerning. If I'm a
yeah,
CEO and my company's in that bucket, you should be very, very concerned. And I just don't think they're aware of it. I really
yeah,
don't.
I
Hopefully
believe you're
that's what
right.
the PPCI is going to do.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's talk about tech, right? Only tech question we ask here is what are the most impactful enablers? Interestingly, Julie, you won't see AI and ML here, and that's because they fell into the bottom. And what I think the reason for that is that right now, not everyone has that to be able to tell you that it's making an impact. I
Yeah.
think they'd love to see, they're excited for the impact. I think that's coming out in the tech optimism, but I don't think we probably have about a quarter of folks actually using it. And
Yeah.
that was about the kind of engagement. It was right down there below digital payments and such. But as you can see, where everyone's focused is cloud technology, workflow and automation. Some of them have made legacy RPA investments that they're still using. I think you heard that come through in a few of the conversations I had on the source
Hmm.
at
Hmm.
Paycon. RPA was brought up a few times in those bigger enterprises. So
Yeah.
they're still probably transitioning over to some of those. And again, we got some organizations that aren't even in the cloud yet. So how do they even start to talk about machine learning and AI? I don't know. It's going to be rough, especially if they can't trust their data. So not a lot of movement here on what was the most impactful. And I think that you're going to see more. I think you're going to see digital payments rise, and I think
Mhm.
cloud is going to stay at that forefront just
Yeah.
because of the launchpad nature of it. So,
The other thing that'll be interesting is
yeah.
as folks use and engage with AI tools more often, AI tools are tools that actually progress workflow and analytic reporting, right? And so
Yep.
it'll be curious to see if they stand out as a category unique in and of themselves, or if they just kind of become enablers to some of
Yeah.
these big categories of
Yeah.
efficiencies.
Agreed. Agreed. Yeah. But anyway, so looking good there, right? It's good to see more tech getting in the
Yeah,
hands of
yeah.
folks. All right, let's get into the impact. This is my favorite section. This is a section where we got to really see where the rubber meets the road, right? So first thing I've got in here this year, brought over the iceberg. I think it's one of the only few things that we brought over from the last years. Just besides the five pillars, brought those two concepts over. But really, what this is saying is like, look, you're missing the point on what's going on with payroll, what they're doing, what severity it has, and the opportunity that lies ahead. So, just kind of looking ahead here, though, at some of the data, right? And I tried to show you some of the year-over-year breakdowns where I could. I tried to call those out, but right, you basically still have only about a third of payroll ops delivering a high level of ROI,
Yeah.
at least perceived anyway, right? You've only got about 60 some percent of them, or excuse me, more than 2/3 actually lack. This is where I kind of went positive to negative. Lack confidence that they're actually going to do enough about it to get that value out of the payroll operations, and the same thing that their strategy or their organizations are really aligned to make it happen. So there's still a lot to be done in order for payroll to be set up in the best success, and a lot of that is just its organization and its leadership coming to the understanding that payroll is important. And when you dig into those ops that are operating at a higher level versus or higher maturity versus those that aren't, you can see there's just a lot of strong impacts to the way that they are performing from a confidence level. And that's something I think you want to hear as an executive trying to navigate a very volatile, marketplace
Yeah,
right now.
marketplace, sure,
Yeah.
for sure.
So
Yeah.
now here's where we got to have a conversation, really, Julie. Kind of the elephant in the room, backflipping over an elephant in the room is what I called it. You can look at this and see the health of relationships here, and we're getting a little better there on the executive side, which is really positive. I'm hearing more of that in the market, so this aligns. But interestingly, when you read into the qualitative comments, it's like HR has the best relationship overall with payroll, but yet is the biggest abuser, the
Yep.
biggest excluder, right? The biggest in far as I don't know if I should go as far as to say bully, right? In some ways,
I always have to temper you with the HR, poor
but
HR
really, Julie, if
patients.
you, I wish I could. I
Yeah.
might actually do it just out of
Oh,
anonymity
no.
here. I think I might take all the qualitative comments and just drop them raw into a LinkedIn post and not say a word. And I think if you saw how many times HR payrolls talked about HR being excluding them, right? Making it where they're kind of coming to them after they've made decisions, and the less than sort of stuff. It's just over and over and over again,
You know, I
and
have
it's
a little bit of
unfortunate.
a
It's
I have a little
unfortunate.
bit of a theory about that. I think
Yeah,
the fact that payroll is able to diagnose and call out areas, but they have to go to HR because they're not the fixers, right? They're not the ones who control or own that data. Creates a little bit of a underappreciation for the fact
yeah,
that one does understand the other, that payroll does understand causal, root cause and
yeah,
things
yeah,
things that are happening in HR. And some of it's a little bit like, okay, there's my safety guard, or there's the payroll police. That are going
yeah,
to tell me that I didn't you
yeah,
know I didn't handle this exactly the way the books would have said to handle it. And so I feel like some of that is an appreciation thing, and we've talked to some folks in our podcast says that have been doing some interesting ways to have the groups team together and get
yeah,
an appreciation for each other. I feel like that sits at the has to sit at the heart of some of this
yeah,
in that case
yeah.
in particular.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a lot of factors, but I think and a lot of it has to do with the whole bookkeeping thing, and payroll sometimes reporting to HR. But I think that this is really like this is something like we've got to address. This is a systemic problem, right? This isn't. I've worked with some of the biggest companies on the planet, some of the smallest companies on the planet, and I've seen it. I've seen it in both, right? And it's time we fix this, right? Because the idea that the firm, the very organization charged with inclusion is excluding its most essential partner to a strategic detriment, rooted in just a lack of ignorance, not knowing what they do. And I wrote that right here at the top. I mean, I just think that this is something we've got to address and deal with, because until this changes, maybe executives are being shielded from that value because HR doesn't understand what it is or doesn't want payroll to outshine them or for some reason. I don't know, but we've got to
Yeah.
stop this because it's just really a detriment. It's a massive detriment.
And I think it's fair to say that the reason that that bar is set so high for HR is because it's charged with inclusion and,
Yeah.
and recognizing that value. I've worked with several organizations where finance owned payroll.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
if you're working with a finance leader who's trying to figure out, asset management and valuation and movement of monies and other things, like payroll is not its biggest
Yeah.
priority or importance either. So I feel like the behavior is similar, but the bar is maybe set a little bit higher because of HR's role and the expectation.
Yeah. 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 We got to stop it though. It's just, it's crazy.
You're
It's
right.
crazy.
We got
Sad.
another year to get some material results.
Yeah, yeah, unfortunately. We'll see. All right. So, what happens when executives are engaged? Well, it compounds, right? I really went deeper on this year and
I love
analyzed
that. This was
those
so
that are and are not, leaning in. And you can just see, I mean, it just starts with better respect. It goes into, payroll more likely being a CE or a COE, center of expertise. You're talking about a more likeliness to have that vision and strategy, increased advisory engagement time, just on and on, right? The ROI then compounds. And certainly there's a lot more confidence when it comes to being able to deliver what the business wants to deliver. So this right here to me is just a, ROI for the taking. Just come dip your cup in the Kool-Aid pond and start sipping, because it's right here, and we're overlooking it. And maybe some of that is other departments shielding payroll from their opportunity to prove that. And I think if you could get that investment in that infrastructure, and you had that vision and strategy, and you had executives leaning in and HR including payroll, what could be, right? And I think this is the what could be is the answer. So
Yeah, and I can just tell you, for working with, dozens of business cases every year, every 6 months, really, I think the
yeah,
biggest challenge with this is just ROI. So frequently, the bar is set against the operations budget ROI, and
yeah,
so many of these things are values that are not necessarily reflected in reduced headcount or traditional measures that a CFO is going to ask for to say, hey,
yeah,
how much are you going to decrease your operations budget? These are other values, and finding a way to communicate that and to measure it and to
yeah,
report on it and be proud about it, speak proudly about it is a challenge. And I believe that your PPCI results
yeah,
will
yeah,
help to do that over time.
yeah.
Will help
Yeah.
organizations to say, I'm here, and and peers and others who aren't doing this are down here.
I hope so. I hope so. Yeah, we really have to make this. This has to be about understanding the value of payroll beyond just some checks, just beyond compliance, right? There's a lot more going on here, and I think it's a competitive advantage if you play your cards right. So,
Yeah.
and I got something for that, Julie. I
I
got something
know.
I'm gonna introduce here. So let's get a little bit further into now. One thing we did drop this year was we did drop. I blended them together kind of here and said, rather than asking about investments from, what would be the top investments and what would be the top ways to support you, we blended those together. We may go back to a separate one, but I tried to, again, conserve time for folks and not try to ask the same thing again. So we really just asked, what's the best way your leaders could support you? And investments were part of that, but we just didn't go into, say, a subset of what type of investment. So in this case, you can see at the table right up there, right? They just want inclusion. I think this report is largely a cry for help. Like,
Yeah.
hey, you're burning us out. You've given us no support, no investment. You're asking us to perform these miracle tasks. Include us, just include us in the conversation. And I don't think that's a lot to ask from business leaders. And that's what payroll is, right? Business leaders that need to be engaged in that way. Operating model modernization, I think that screams investment. Exec engagement, right? Just listen to us, engage with us, look at our data, let's talk, let's have a conversation and dialogue. And that goes with that seat at the table and COE status as well. And again, adequate investment, right? We've got to modernize. You can see that coming through in the data later when you look at what people are asking for, the top things they want. The multi-country side is really heavy into that adequate investment and modernization. But to a lesser extent, too, the single country guys as well. But certainly for the globals, it's a big deal.
There's one thing I
Yeah.
really want to point out here,
Yeah.
Pete, that really tugs on my heartstrings, and that is the whole idea of the operating model modernization. And I
Yeah.
say that because I've had a fourfold increase in engagements and work
Good.
with clients who want to dig into the payroll operating model,
Yeah.
whether it's shoring and where and how reasonably they could shore certain tasks and activities in payroll, even for a domestic payroll, to a global payroll model, and wondering if I'm engaging with providers or systems or tools, to do this part of the work, do I have the right amount? Do I have the right structure? Do I have the right things in place for
Hmm.
my operating model? And is that right sized? Or, usually
Yeah.
they come to us because they feel like it's not. Why do I still have so many people if I'm
Right.
outsourcing payroll? Right?
Right. I don't feel
Is
transformed.
the number
Yeah.
one question. And I'll tell
Yeah.
you that it's tricky to dig into, because first of all, folks who haven't done payroll or aren't close to payroll are genuinely terrified to dig into payroll processes, rules,
Yeah.
compliance, and all the nitty-gritty. And so you can't bluff that. You
Yep.
have to have a certain level of expertise to be able to have something meaningful to say about that. And so, I'm going to be thrilled to bring some more practitioner conversations to the table
Yes.
in this area, and will be excited to see what people are talking about on payroll influences around
Yeah.
their activities there, because that is a tough nut to crack. And it is something that more and more of you payroll leaders and payroll practitioners are digging into for its value. So thank
Yeah.
you, everyone. And yeah, that's a biggie.
Yeah, yeah, no, that perfectly said. I would agree, and maybe that's part of HR kind of getting out of the way and letting payroll step forward and show them. Right? If you don't know, I agree that I talk about that meme of how Homer Simpson fading into the bushes. Like that's HR, and a lot of these big due diligences and transformations and changes is if it sounds like payroll, it's scary and they fade
Yeah.
away. Lean in and learn. Like there's a lot here, and if you don't know, bring your you should be bringing your payroll team to the table. Let them guide you. They're not trying to steal the limelight. They're not trying to outshine anybody. They just want to make sure they can block and tackle, and they can't do that with their legs kicked out from underneath them and finding out about things after the fact. So let's get them to the table. So, okay, how are we doing on 5 pillars? Let's take a look at that. This year, what we did was we went a little bit deeper on the maturity and said, all right, well, how are you performing against the 5 pillars of modern payroll? And those being the ones you see here, which is the definition, or my definition here at Payroll Influences, is to define for you the 5 strategic pillars of ROI, if you will, strategic payroll, for lack of better terms. That is delivering the modern pay experience, first operating as a compliance center of expertise there in the center, advising the business through strategic initiatives, helping to facilitate access to talent and skill anywhere. That could be local, that could be abroad. And of course, helping support organizational agility, which goes hand in hand with that compliance center of expertise and the strategic advisory. So as you can see, you don't have that many organizations actually there. We've got about 6% of payroll operations are actually saying we believe we're operating at the highest level on all of these. So we've got a lot of work to do here, right? We've got 90+% of the world is not ready to handle these things that they should already be handling. And we're finding some great organizations, Julie, right? We've got a few folks coming on the podcast to talk about that, some payroll executives that are doing just this in their organization. And it's possible, it's real, and we're seeing it brought to life. And so I'm doing a lot more work on this over the year. I'll be pushing more cases out on and podcasts out on folks doing more around the 5 pillars and exhibiting the 5 pillars. And certainly want to, start to explore how and what the ingredients are for what's making them successful, like reporting structures, like how their their leaders are investing in them and in being invested and engaged with them. So really want to dig out those characteristics and try to share that with everyone soon.
That's so cool.
So
People just
yeah,
definitely want to hear that. And then just a
yeah,
reminder, when you're seeing those things throughout the course of the next 12 months until our next PPCI, don't be discouraged. Every journey is a little bit unique. And so the idea is, as Pete brings several of these forward, to identify what fits in your situation and what doesn't fit,
yeah,
and get some peer help, and reach out if you are trying to navigate how can I bring more of these things into focus for me.
yeah.
Everybody's path is going to be a little bit different, but yeah, overall we really need to work together to move the needle across the industry.
Absolutely. I probably should have put a note here. You'll notice you've got at the individual level it looks almost like 20%, right? You're like, oh, it looks like most people are operating at about 20%. But if you go in deeper, and maybe I need to note
It's
this.
not the same
It's
20%,
not the
right?
same
Yeah.
thing, right? Because
That's
if you said, all right, well, are you? Because some folks are doing well with some places and not others, right? They're doing
yeah,
really
yeah.
well as a compliance center, but they're not doing that great at enabling org agility or whatever. So what you have here is only 6% of organizations said we are doing all of these at a 5,
Yeah, that's a
right?
great
So yeah,
clarification, and maybe
yeah,
at some point in time, there's kind of
yeah.
these, levers or something that give you an idea of.
Yeah, I need to add a note there, so I'll pop
Yeah,
that in later and kind of do
very
a little
cool.
revision. But yeah, all right. So this is next thing is something I'm very proud of. I set out to say, all right, fine. Look, we're sitting here historically looking at payroll, and it feels like every research report that comes out, every cost case or every business case that comes out, it's all about how much can we strip out of payroll, how many people can we get rid of, how cheap can we make it, how do we make this as low frills as we can possibly do without actually screwing this up, right? And I think that is, and I would say this for HR as well, it's the wrong thing to be doing at this time of the world, right? Now more than ever, you really got to be doubling down on HR and payroll as a strategic lever, as a strategic enabler. And I don't think a lot of companies, we can see in the data, have come around to that understanding, right? But never before has anyone set out to say, well, what does that look like, right? We never had anyone define, we whipped payroll for 100 years and said, be more strategic, never showing them what that was. We have the 5 pillars now. So same thing for payroll ROI. Why does ROI have to entirely be about how much money we saved, right? Why does it have to be entirely about who we got rid of and what we didn't, what we don't have now because of whatever strip out we did? So I said, well, what if we took that a step further? What if we looked at payroll and said, what is the strategic impact payroll should be making, right? What is that? And that's where I came up with the modern payroll ROI scorecard. Now, before I show you this, I'm going to bounce back to the exec summary for this because I have a one pager on this. But I want you to understand that this is a conceptual framework, right? This is not a benchmark. None of these metrics in here should be seen as a benchmark, not for industry, not for overall, none of that. It is entirely meant to start a place in the sand, a line in the sand to say, how do we begin having a conversation about this? How do we begin leaning towards a different story for payroll that's not just timeliness, accuracy, and compliance? We understand all that has to happen. To me, that's the speed, that's the oil pressure, that's the other things that you want to look at on your dash to make sure that you're doing the right things as you're driving the car down the road. But how do you know if you're getting strategic impact from payroll? And I do believe we could measure this with some work. But this would take a lot of, I would say, customization, not a lot, but some customization for your unique business, your unique situation, and the stage of maturity that you're in. You may not be in a state of maturity yet to be able to actually begin measuring any of these things or having these conversations. But it could at least help, I think, orient your mind around what this could be, what this could look like, and how this could fundamentally come to life. So I want to pause there, Julie, and just get your thoughts before I show you this. I'm going to bounce back to this, but just want to know your thoughts on this so far.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
I'm excited about it, and I actually think this would be, the stories and the use cases that you're talking about are going to be the right way
yeah,
for you to start to bring this to life, right? Because the risk is people see a scorecard and they're like, okay, well, score me and tell me the 5 things I need to do to, be in the top quartile, right? We've
yeah,
all operated like that for forever and ever. We're conditioned to operate that way. So I think it's really important not only to start to dig into it, but also to set that context and realize that this is as
yeah,
slow as you go. This is going to be a slowly. Let's figure out how we get this thing,
yeah.
to be meaningful for any individual organization.
Yeah, yeah, and let me maybe explain you through this, and then talk you through this, and then know that at the back of this document, I'll go back to it. I'll show you. We're bouncing around a little. Back now in the executive summary, at the end of the executive summary, we show this as a one slider. But if you go to the end, I've got the breakdowns on all of this, and I'll show you this. But Julie, the idea here again, I don't proclaim this to be perfect. I don't proclaim this to be a benchmark or anything that you should take off the shelf and go and run down the road with. I think you should take it off the shelf, think about it, shape it, begin to get the spirit of it employed into your scorecard. But it's just something that could give us all a spot to begin soundboarding off of. And again, I'm very proud of this because I feel like this is something that's necessary. These are the types of things and the types of I think positioning that when I say lead your organization, don't be led, this is the types of points of view I think you've got to start coming with that says, look at us differently. Let me show you how we're impacting your bottom line, not just from a cost perspective and a cost takeout, but from a value creation, from a strategy enablement, from an ease of frictionless expansion or growth or whatever you want to call it. I think there's a way to do this. And so, look, you'll see on here, I've tried to give you 6 to 8 metrics that I feel could be in the spirit of what I'm trying to show here. Now, again, I'm not telling you to abandon your standard ROI, or excuse me, your standard metrics.
Girl
You need
metric.
those for running the day to day. You need those for flying the plane or driving down the road with the car. But this is an ROI conversation. So this is about trying to understand what value you're returning beyond that cost takeout. And so I think there are going to be cost elements of this, but I think it's going to be more around value realization and risk avoidance and things like optimization, right? Process optimization and innovation. So I think that's where kind of the financial element these lie, plus the value of what is the value of payroll being a big four consultant to us versus us going and hiring Mercer or someone else, Deloitte, whatever, right? What is that value? What if we went to the external market to get this insight? And I'm going to show you how all these break down. But again, if you go around, right, you'll see the internal process. It's really around quality. It's around process optimization. It's around compliance readiness, regulatory anticipation, right, be able to head things off, security and privacy, business continuity. When's the last time you saw business continuity on any scorecard, Julie? I don't know if there
Yeah, it was all but
not
gone
many.
before
Yeah.
COVID, and then all of a sudden it was top of mind 100%, and now it's settled back down
Yeah.
into the dust, right?
Right. Yeah. So this is some of the things like when you talk about scalability, flexibility, resiliency, that's the stuff you got to be measuring. All of this goes into that org agility bucket, right? I'm also going to give you in the back of this, I'll show you a mapping to the 5 pillars so you know what you're getting and a metric example. So this will give you a little bit more color. And then you'll see some of these are in italics, Julie. Now, those are what I would call alternates, right? Something, the first 6 or so are kind of what I'm recommending. And then the others are ones that you could swap in and out just to give you some flexibility there. But play with this, right? There might be other metrics specific to your sector or business or what you do that you want to measure for the business. And I think you could shape an ROI scorecard and start to have a conversation around it. When you come down into the customer section, we're really looking at that pay experience, that quality commitment, the wellness commitment, right? I think we need to start looking at financial wellness as part of the impact of the pay experience, and are we measuring that properly? And really just understanding, are we delivering the quality from the customer perspective that we should be, not just are we timely, accurate, and compliant, right? And then of course over on that innovation and improvement side, I think it's all about being agile, being able to scale and flex and perform against what your company wants you to do, right? And process improve and optimize, and really use your data predictively to be able to help the company create that agility and work across your organization to be very resilient for the business, right? Be that, look, payroll's a service provider as much as anything to their business. And I think they've got to be partnered in a way that says they're a very strategic partner, very strategic service that we have to make sure is in lockstep with everything we do. So yeah, this is just sort of my point of view on what I think payroll ROI should be looking like. So it's something, right? We don't have anything like this that I know of, Julie.
Yeah, no, I'm sure not. And yet at the same time, I can go almost point for point down what is a very intuitive and very amazing list to be looking at and think about something else. Take customer, first time accuracy, and quality excellence.
Yeah.
There are different ways to incorporate it to drive that item, just as one
Yeah.
called out of the blue, whether it's, through provider SLAs or through shared service metrics in your operational scorecard, and figuring out, which are easy, which are hard. I've seen many of these, I've included many of these in client business cases, right?
Yeah.
And I think much like anything that is very specific to you and your situation, you need to be able to kind of navigate your way through, what is a good template or a good list of items, and figure out what's here that I can grab onto that resonates, or that is useful to me, either to pump up an aspect that's low performing, or because it's something that is achievable to me.
Yeah.
So lots of
Agreed.
meat there, Pete. And I'm
Yeah.
so excited to be able to, look at some of the use cases and other things that we'll be
Yeah.
able to bring to the table as
Well, let me
people
show you a little bit
do
about
it.
what this looks like. So if you go back to the end of the report, you'll see the scorecard again. The disclaimer: make this your own. This is just a line in the sand. It's just an artist's palette, right, for you to build off of and start to build what you need. But if you go into this, Julie, you'll see I've provided a breakdown of the standard and then kind of the alternates there at the end, where I gave italics on the alternates. And I have that for every section. And you'll notice what I've provided here is just sort of a KPI name, which maps back to that scorecard that you saw in the exec summary, a measurement description, kind of an example metric. Again, not a benchmark. Not a
Yeah,
benchmark. Don't take this and assume
I
it's a
know, but
benchmark.
people will do
not,
it. I'm telling
not a
you, it's
benchmark.
gotta
It
have
is,
it.
yeah, it's fundamentally and it might be directionally correct. Let's be honest. It probably is. But let's be honest that you've got to shape this for your payroll, your operation, your culture, your whatever, whatever you're doing. I've shown you kind of where it aligns to the 5 pillars. The easy thing would be to tell you that all of this aligns. But I try to get a little bit more specific and break this down for you. And then, of course, I wanted to show you the business value. Like, what is the value of what you're really trying to show to the business? Now, my suggestion to you is, I would say where I would start, depending upon your maturity with this, Julie. You tell me what you think. Take this and use it as the opportunity for you, like I said, to shape it. But what I would really do is I would go lay this up against your most highest level strategic KPIs in the business, and I would, and then the KPIs that your boss or your leadership has between those two and you, and start to reconcile those together and see how you can shape this from that lens. And I think if you do that and you begin to sort of have conversations around those, I think you can have a really robust conversation that you might not have had before. And now you start to position payroll in an entirely different level of eminence, in my opinion. I really do think this is the start of being able to help people have open up new conversations that are very different than in the past.
Yeah, yeah, I
Yeah,
think so too. And I think at the first level, we'll see folks that have found their way doing something
yeah,
very similar, just because there's some intuition, behind it, and there's some common sense that underlies this.
yeah,
And secondly, I think it'll be fun for me as someone who works with
yeah,
clients through this over and over again to take a look at what we've been doing in practitioner situations and cast it in this light, and maybe then begin to bring some of those stories forward and help
yeah,
folks see, what did I catch, what did I miss,
yeah, yeah,
where can I
exactly.
go next. And so I almost go as far as to say, if I'm not working with you, there's I have a certain bandwidth and a love for supporting and making these things make sense and come together, and I might be happy to do a couple of those
Yeah,
together with you, Pete, on a trial basis,
yeah.
just to see if we could bring those cases and those examples forward.
Yeah, I would just love to see anybody, just go and use it to think. That's all I want. I'm
Yeah.
not trying to be necessarily prescriptive here. I'm really just trying to say, I'm challenging the market to say, let's just have a different conversation. I could be 100% wrong about every line of this, and I'm okay with that. As long as that all that results from it is that we start having people go, wait a minute, payroll can provide strategic ROI outcomes. Let me how much you
Oh,
got? You know what I
yeah.
mean? let me
Yeah.
have some. I'll take it, right? Like, I
Well, I
never
could
thought of
use a
that.
bit.
That would be a win. And so, yeah, whatever this does to inspire and motivate, that's all this is about. So, yeah. Let's talk some demographics, and I want to come back to the
Please,
exec summer. We can
please.
wrap this baby up. So, all right, demographics. Like I said, Julie, we didn't quite get the depth we had last year. I was a little bit bummed. Australia really dropped off. Now, everyone else showed up and stepped up. Europe really came through more this year. I think I'll shout out the CIPP. I assume that was probably part of that. They really leaned in. So thank you so much. All my folks in Africa, HR Africa Solutions, some of the vendors and folks down there shared. But Australia, we got to get back on track. So we slipped a little there. But we did stay pretty steady everywhere else and grew pretty good. So looking pretty good, and we hit 31 countries, which I'm very proud of. I don't know that there's another report that even comes close to that,
Yeah.
far as I know. So maybe Stacy's over at Sapient, but that's not purely payroll. So who
Yeah.
knows?
Excellent.
All right. Let's look at the respondents. This is where I think we got to get concerned here, right? We're talking about, again, a massive swath. 77% of folks are probably going to age out of here pretty soon. 10 years, right? 10 or so, 10 plus. That's a problem, and I think we've got to really be worried about that. I think the other thing that we're noticing here is, right, Julie, we're still stuck in that middle management space.
Hmm.
Payroll's not moving up, right? And I think that's a concern. We are seeing more payroll leaders get into that executive level, and we need more. we've got to cry for the CPO, right? The chief payroll officer coming from
30 by
Chime.
30, right?
Yeah, 30 by 30. So shout out to Jason Lee and
30
the
by
team there
2030.
doing everything they can to try and normalize that, just like the CFO position. But I think we've got to have a lot more career opportunity. And I hope that we're going to see a bit more of that youth coming into the space, which I'm actually meeting some younger payroll leaders now. So that's very exciting. But I think we've got to do more to try and really bring in the talent to
Yeah,
the
and
space. So,
between our Gen Z
yeah.
and Vet series, I know we've been doing a lot to try to get some conversations going with different groups.
Yeah.
I wonder, Pete, let me ask you, because other
Yeah.
folks might have this question as well. When you show the executive management on the right, respondents by role and executive management, that is regardless of what their title might be, right? So if they've
Yeah.
worked their way up through the payroll ranks and now they're a VP of HR operations or a VP of finance operations or shared services,
Yes.
that will still place them in that bucket, even if they've, let's say, outgrown a payroll specific title. Am I
Yes,
right?
yeah. Now we did not ask titles. What we asked is what level are you at? Are you
Okay.
in, are you a frontline, practitioner, professional? Are you as a frontline manager? Are you a middle manager? Are you, we ask those things. And so we don't go into titles. I kind of left a little bit more
Yeah.
open to perception. Where do you feel you fit in this bucket? And this is where we,
Yeah.
what we kind of get. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's
But
okay. I think what's important
yeah,
about that is, that those conversations begin to go further and further up
yeah.
the chain, right? That's exactly what you're trying to measure.
Yeah, absolutely. Just see where we're headed. So, yeah, we got a little work to do for sure. Now, respondents, good balance, right? We've got
Yeah.
a good number of folks that are about half are single country, which I was happy with. The rest, though, are global,
Mhm.
multi-country and or multi-region. So you got a decent little swath there. And then, of course, we got a pretty balanced set of types of customers, right? We had a good number. I'd like to see a little bit more of the over 50,000, but we had about
Yeah.
7%. That's not bad. It could be a lot of these surveys come out very small market leaning. And I think we had a pretty good, pretty good swath. So I'm pretty happy with it.
Yeah.
And then as always, I've got the breakdowns here in the back. And again, you're going to see, I did not do year over year comparisons here, Julie, because we did mix things up a little bit. So
Yeah.
I don't
Makes
want to do
sense.
that. So I did it throughout, right, where I think it was relevant. And a lot of this didn't really change year over year. It was kind of similar. Yeah. So anyway, you'll have breakdowns here in the back for all of the questions or all the categories of questions, not the question itself. Kind of showing you what the overall is. Now, the overall, again, is going to be all of the folks, the average number of firms that are in this category, either below or above 1,000, that are answering a 4 or 5 in high maturity to the item, right? And then, of
Yeah.
course, when it comes to the relationships, I kind of gave you the averages there. So down the middle is just the overall, and then left to right is going to be your, above and below 1,000 employees. And we do the same thing for, enablers and ways to champion payroll. And then, of course, I've got the same for single and multi-country footprints. So you get a little variation here and there. You can kind of see where all that lies. So yeah, that's basically the report. I'm going to come back to the exec summary if you don't mind. I just want to show you that a little bit because I think it's very important that folks share this with their executives if you can. And I'd love to see, I'd love to see you do that. But I want to make sure it's very simple to read. This just tells you about the report methodology. I think I've already talked about this, about what the report is, how many folks we reached. Again, we fell short by about 100, hitting our goal last year of what we hit last year. But I'm happy. I mean, this is still a very solid number. We went further, more countries, but we've got to have more help. We really need help. I mean, and it's got to go beyond LinkedIn, right? I mean, not everybody's hanging on LinkedIn. We've got to get it out there and put it in people's hands, email it and otherwise. So we're going to do some things next year to ramp that up, open up the cycle longer, make it a little bit more, a little further away from year end. And we had some big vendors come on last year, kind of late. That'll come on earlier, and we hopefully can really hit some big numbers. So just stick with us. We're getting there. So report methodology, again, 1 to 5 scale on most everything. Where possible, we try to either show, the, kind of a carve out of those performing highly mature against how many are not, and vice versa. How many maybe are performing, if the number sort of lays the other way, that story kind of leans negative, we'll show you the amount that are detractors against sort of, the number of overall. So try to make it very, very easy to discern. And I'll be honest with you, Julie, if you look at a typical NPS, a lot of them go to 10. There's no real point. We could
Yeah.
just do 5 to make it easier for everyone. But a lot of times they'll tell you to pull the 4s into more of a passive.
Yeah.
And I just don't agree. I want to try and try to give people the benefit of the doubt of maturity if they're in that 4 bucket. Because to me, if you're at a 4, you're walking in the right direction, right? You're
Yeah.
on the right path. To say that you're kind of still in the passives, I don't think that's fair. So I have made the choice, right, wrong, or indifferent, that 1s and 2s are detractors, 4s and 5s are my promoters. Meaning that 5, you've kind of arrived at that maturity, and 4, you're getting on the cusp there.
Well,
So
maybe
yeah,
much like any continuous improvement, measure or metric, as you get closer to the higher end of the percentage
yeah,
scale,
yeah,
there might be some reason to dial that in a little bit differently, right? But at
yeah,
this
yeah,
point in time, when there's so much room for improvement
yeah,
across the board, then that's certainly a judgment
yeah.
call that, I don't think you
Agreed.
could argue with.
Yeah, and I want people to be, I don't want people to be bummed out, right? I want people to look at this, and go, yeah, hey, we're making progress. Like, I feel like if you're on your way, like, that should be commended, right? Listen, none of this happened. You know as well as I do, none of this, especially in big multinational organizations. Payroll transformation is forever.
Yeah.
It really never ends, especially when you're acquiring and you're, divesting and you're going through all these things. It
And
just never
compliance is
ends
changing,
all
I
the
mean,
time.
on you
Yeah.
as you roll with it. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it
You're
needs
never
to be
there. You're
encouraging.
never there. Yeah. Anyway. So what are you going to get if you get the exec summary here? Well, report on a slide, right? I've got you right here. You can look at this. You can pretty quickly surmise a lot of the information here. So very easy to digest. This will be good for my social media graphics, Julie.
That's
And then
right.
I certainly go through here and I really give the executive summary on 2 slides to explain to you the report, right? And the real key themes here look, tech matters, but your engagement is going to matter a lot more. Vision and strategy is where it all starts, and payroll investment is really just not an option, right? It's a fundamental, or excuse me, payroll as a cost center is not an option. You've got to start looking at it as an investment center. It's just
That's a
like
tough
HR.
that is a tough message,
Yeah,
honestly.
that's
I
where the
mean,
ROI comes
there's
in.
some
That's where the ROI
swimming
comes in.
upstream that has to happen for that to stick. I can just tell you
But
that.
it's not hyperbolous though. It
No,
really is not. And I
that's right.
think we're showing we've got a couple of podcasts already with I did it over on the source, but we're going to bring them over for longer conversations here on the HR and Payroll 2.0 podcast with a couple of very high level enterprise executives, VPs that are doing amazing stuff, living the 5 pillars and doing
That's right.
exactly this and living this. So this is very possible
Yeah,
and
it's
very
very
necessary.
real, but it's
Yeah.
a tough nut to swallow.
Oh, it is. It's a tough nut for HR to push, right? So and HR needs the same respect. They need to be an investment, not a cost center.
That's
It's
right.
not enough. So, yep. And then of course we're going to go into kind of the rest here. The fact that look, you're leaving value on the table, right? You're leaving competitive advantage. You've got business leaders sitting in payroll that you're ignoring that have a ridiculously rich data set. And by the way, there's a modern ROI paradigm shift going on around payroll that you really ought to know about. So that's the messaging here. Again, we hammered home the 5 pillars and came off of that to say, look, what happens when you nurture payroll? It's a whole different outcome for your business. But it requires a different lens. It requires a different viewpoint on what ROI looks like. And that's where we provide the modern payroll scorecard. So that's really your executive summary. And yeah, that's your Payroll Profession Confidence Index for 2025. I think we're looking at about 50 pages 45 or so pages of content. A lot of new stuff here, a lot of different viewpoints, a lot of drill downs that are taking this deeper and really bringing this to life. So thank you to any and everybody that had anything to do with it. I couldn't have done it without you. So thank you.
And Pete, since
Yeah.
there aren't other voices here to tell you, I'm just going to say thank you for making this a labor of love. I think if
Yes.
anyone tuned into this thinking it would just be slides updated from last year's index without a lot more
No.
meat or content, they don't know you very well.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it is a personal mission of yours. It's a labor
Yeah.
of love, and we think we hear at organizations and industry conferences that it's making a difference.
Yeah.
And there
I
are
hope
folks
so.
that are networking in a community that is coming together around making some of this happen
Yeah.
and helping each other to do that. So
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate your help too. You've been a big part of helping me get eyes on it. And so it's just so many people. I couldn't thank everyone. It would take us a whole podcast to just sit there and thank the list.
yeah, so we won't.
But everyone does a great job. But I'll tell you this, look, I'm going to put this out with this podcast, and it's free and open. It's already out there if you can grab it, if you haven't. I have quietly sent it around to a handful of the top executives at the biggest vendors, and said, hey, tell me what you think about this. Give me your thoughts. So I'm actually hoping, I would love to see it get dripped into the way they're communicating in their sales enablement. And maybe we can start to have someone else using this to have change the narrative, because that's what we need. That's what this is all about. Change the narrative on payroll. So here it
Yeah.
is.
Absolutely.
Go get it.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Perfect issue. It's great timing,
Yep.
and it's very exciting, Pete. So
Yeah.
thanks so much
Yeah.
for sharing and for all of your heartfelt labor of love.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Look, everybody, stick and stay with us. We got big things coming. We love you guys. Appreciate you. And we will be back very, very soon.